For almost 2 years now, I've been working on this super fast, melee-focused dungeon runner where you drink the blood of your foes and use it to propel your insane wall-running, high-flying movement and combat abilities. Oh, and I'm making it with Godot. The game's called Bloodthief, and would you look at that? It's got a Steam page. So, go wishlist it. So one thing I've wanted to have in the game from the very beginning is epic, mythic weapons that you find in these mysterious lands of Bloodthief's world. I've been kind of putting it off though, because it kind of seems like a lot of work. But a few months ago, I don't know, I kind of just decided I was gonna ignore all the advice people say about scope creep and just freaking do it. And I've been spending the time since then modeling and texturing swords, writing a ton of code, building new UIs, writing epic lore, and all sorts of other stuff to bring weapons, inventory, and loot into Bloodthief. And that's what I'm gonna be talking about in this video. Here we go. So I want weapons in Bloodthief to work like masks in Hotline Miami, where each weapon gives you a cool perk. Things like starting the level out with blood or granting you double jump. I can also see a world where some swords have a unique ability, like maybe there's a flame sword that shoots a fireball or something like that. I also want it to work similarly to Hotline Miami in that you get to choose your weapon in the beginning of the level, but after that you're locked in and you can't change it mid-level. Otherwise I feel like this could easily be min-maxed, and I just don't want people to be able to use this to cheese the game. Plus I don't want Bloodthief to ever feel like an RPG. Like, at the end of the day, this is an action game. I don't want people spending any more time than they have to messing around in inventory screens when, you know, you could be blowing up bad guys with your sword. All right, this system seems pretty good to me. Done enough planning, let's get building. So first things first, I hopped into Blender and started trying to model out some swords. I had two ideas for swords that I wanted to try to make. One was just gonna be like this black spike, and it was gonna be called the Sliver of Darkness. I don't want to take credit for this one. I give credit to my cousin John for coming up with this. He actually wrote like 2 pages of lore for this sword, which is fucking amazing. And for the other sword, I wanted to make something totally different. So I got these reference images of these curvy swords that had these ornate handles that I kind of liked. And this one I'm calling the Weeping Blade. If you haven't learned this by now by watching my devlogs, I'm like terrible with Blender. I'm maybe intermediate level these days. And yeah, that might make you wonder, why did you choose to do a 3D game for your first commercial project? And to that I say,
who am I? And why do I exist? And who made me? And what am I expected to do with my life?
But I ended up with these two things, which, not bad. The texture work is definitely doing the heavy lifting on these. I did the textures in Substance Painter, and you might be asking, Blargus, why are you paying $50 a month for Substance Painter when you can use Blender for texture painting? And my answer is because Substance Painter is a friggin' cheat code, and dude, it's worth it. Like, this is basically the extent of what I can do in Blender, because if I want to apply any shadows, highlights, or details, I have to draw it on by hand, which my drawing skills are subpar to say the least. But let me show you how I did this in Substance Painter. First off, with Substance, you can use information about the geometry to generate details. For these swords, I've been using the curvature maps and thickness maps generated by Substance. You can already tell from this thickness map that we're gonna be able to get some nice shading information here for this sword. I can use this to generate some highlights, and I'll throw on this pixel art plugin from Action Dog, and boom. This is obviously not like amazing, but it's night and day from what I was producing with Blender alone. So remember folks, money doesn't buy you happiness, but it does buy you Substance Painter, which will make you happy. So in conclusion, money does buy you happiness. Nah, I'm just kidding, but in all seriousness, I've heard Armor Paint is a viable free alternative to Substance Painter. I'm not gonna lie though, I've learned so many freaking tools this year, I don't know if I can handle another tool. Maybe I'll buy the $200 Steam version so I don't have to do those monthly fees anymore. Anyway, now that the models were done, now all I need to do was basically shove them into the player's hand and figure out a system for being able to equip them. As kind of a prototype, I set it up to work with this command line tool that was made by Jitspo, and check it out, we got the Sliver of Darkness equipped. By the way, Jitspo, if you happen to be watching this, I love you. This command line plugin has been a freaking lifesaver. Just as a quick aside, look at some of these cool commands I've implemented. I can start up the level, I can quickly navigate to whatever checkpoint I want, I can go into no clip cam, I can give myself full blood, and all of these commands are just so unbelievably useful when I'm debugging, and being able to just really quickly implement a new one whenever I need it saved me probably dozens and dozens of hours. Plus, it works just like the Quake command line, so using it just feels right. So, highly recommend this plugin, I'll link it in the description. So the command line tool was useful for testing, but now I need to make like an inventory screen to make this all legit. I didn't think this inventory screen was gonna be that bad, but whew, oh baby was I wrong. You got control nodes, you got container nodes, you got hover behavior. You have to set up a theme asset. You've got text wrap smart and text wrap not smart. You got controller support, which has got me asking, is joy known? You know, at this point, I'm not so sure. Oh, and since I'm trying to release Bloodthief in a bunch of different languages, a topic for another devlog, all of this has to look good in every language that Bloodthief supports. The other thing about UIs is that they have to look good in any screen aspect ratio or resolution, and I'm learning the hard way that I did Bloodthief's UI in the dumbest way possible. And if I would have taken like 5 minutes to read this doc on resolution scaling in Godot, it would have saved me so much trouble. So, because I didn't heed the sage advice of Shaq, I thought it would be a good idea to just fit all my game's UI in a 720p box because, hey, anyone that's playing my game in 2024 has got to be at least playing at 720p, right? Well, wrong, first of all, but second of all, this is just a needless constraint. Godot has this really nice feature where you can develop your UI at, say, 1080p, and then have it downscale or upscale accordingly depending on the resolution that the player is playing at. And as far as I can tell, this is literally what like every game does. But I'm stuck in this stupid 720p box. Look at all this screen real estate that I'm just not using. So yeah, I'll probably end up changing this eventually, but it's gonna require rearranging a ton of UI stuff, and I'm not particularly excited for that. So I'm procrastinating. Alright, so I made the skeleton for an inventory screen. Now I just need to fill it with a bunch of actual data because my made up temporary text can only take me so far. So I thought up this weapon system that looks kind of like this. Instead of looting a weapon in the world, you'll just loot a part of the weapon. So maybe it's the handle of a sword, or a magic jewel that gets inserted into the hilt, or a cursed spider leg from the swamps of Garbonia. Look, I'm gonna get creative with these. It's gonna get crazy. So these are the things that you're going to find and physically pick up in the world, and then once you have all the parts of a weapon, you unlock it. So in the UI, I want to display the name of an artifact or a weapon, its description, the perk, and a thumbnail for that item. I also want to be able to click this equip button, and it should actually take the scene file for the actual 3D model of the weapon and load it into the game. So all these things, these are basically the data model for the artifact or a weapon. And actually making this data into something real in Godot is a perfect use case for Godot's resources. Resources are basically the Godot-y way of defining some piece of data and storing it. Anything that gets loaded from disk in Godot is a resource, but you can also define your own resources. I see it as an alternative to like JSON or CSV. These options are fine, but what's nice about resources is that I get this nice UI for actually filling in the data. So in my case, I want to be able to specify the sprite color for my artifact, and since it's a resource, I can use the color picker in the inspector. If this was using CSV or something like that, I'd be manually typing in a hex code into a row or something like that, which, you know, that's pretty error prone. With resources, if my attribute is another resource, like an image, I can just drag and drop it in the inspector and physically see the image, which is also just really nice. All right, so now I've got the structure and the data model ready to go. It's finally time to start coming up with the actual content for all this stuff. For Bloodthief, I really like the idea of story and lore being completely out of the way and never mandatory. But if you care to uncover some of these histories and legends of this world, it's there for you to find. I've been doing a ton of writing the past few months. Writing lore for swords is just a great time. It's been awesome getting creative with different ideas. But if I'm being honest, I don't know how much of the specific lore that I have been writing is actually going to make it into the game. There's this video I really like by Questmarker titled "A World Not Desperate to Explain Itself," and the ideas presented in that video really resonated with me. In that video, he uses the phrase that I really like, which is games that provide a small window into a bigger world. The best example of this that I've played recently is Elden Ring, where the lands between are just dripping with life and history around every corner, but rarely does it ever go out of its way to explain to you why exactly something is the way it is, and you're left filling in the cracks with your own imagination. So, in an attempt to create a world that evokes a sense of wonder, adventure, and generates more questions than answers, and also just because I don't think my personal writing skills could do this world any justice, I'm keeping a lot of this lore that I've been writing to myself, and my plan is to surface a projection of it via artifacts you find in the world. I'm hoping this enhances the adventure that the player goes on and keeps gameplay at the forefront, but for now we will just have to wait and see. Alright, so this feature is getting super close. I now have this very cool inventory screen where I can inspect all my weapons and items I've found and equip the weapons I've unlocked. I'm kind of going for this pared down arcadey look in the UI, kind of like an old arcade machine. With that said, there's still no way to actually get these items in your inventory. So I coded up a new lootable entity that allows me to specify the item associated with it, and now I can place these things all over the world in interesting places. Which is perfect because up until now I had all these cool secret areas with nothing to put in them and all these dungeons with no loot. And now I can finally fill all this empty space with meaningful rewards. Of course, because looting something should feel awesome, I made it play this heavenly chorus when you get some loot. And look, I will not be making a unique 3D model for every single item you can find in the game, so everything's just going to be this chalice model. And because Bloodthief is a game about going fast, I wanted to be able to reward the player for getting medals on certain maps. So I added a system where on some maps you'll see a little icon next to the medal indicating, hey, maybe this medal is a little extra special. And of course it's gotta feel good when you finally do get that medal, so I made this cool little pop-up that appears when you get the item. And now this feature is finally done. Well, actually not really done. I still have to make a whole lot more weapons and figure out how to balance all the perks, but that's a problem for future Blargus, and honestly screw that guy. But even with the little bit that I have, this really adds a lot to the game. Now I have a meaningful way to reward the player for both skill and exploration. I have a vessel to deliver world building. And I'm hoping to craft the weapon perks in such a way where different weapons are useful in different levels, which will create a cool metagame and add another dimension to speedrunning. And if you've been following the public playtest, you may be wondering why none of this is available yet. So all this, along with a few other things that have yet to be announced, will all be available when the official demo comes out in early 2025. So stay tuned for that. Last thing, both Bloodthief and myself are in the Godot Game Awards for 2024, put on by Stay at Home Dev. So if you want to support me, go vote in the Godot Game Awards. Voting ends December 14th, so I didn't give you a lot of time, sorry. I'll put a link to that in the description. All right, that's all for this devlog. Do me a huge favor and like and subscribe. And if you're liking what you're seeing from Bloodthief, give it a wishlist on Steam. All right, thanks, bye.